Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Michelle Paranello-Cason, the founder of Dalo Learning, and I am really excited to have this panel together because ChatGPT has taken over conversations in literally every area of my life. It seems like this entire year has just been the ChatGPT year. So I have a PhD in rhetoric and composition, which is a fancy way to say I studied writing a lot. And my circles include current and past English teachers, freelance writers, and of course, lots of homeschooling parents. And all of them are freaking out about ChatGPT, some of them in positive ways, some of them in negative ways, some of them in just confused ways, some of us in all three of those ways. And so as I was diving deeper into it myself and playing around with it, I was like, I would really like to get some of my smart friends to talk with me about this. And I was like, well, why not record that conversation so that everybody can listen in on that? And so that's what we're doing today. I asked two of my colleagues to join me to share their thoughts on ChatGPT specifically and AI language models and what it means for teaching writing and homeschooling parents and guardians in general. And I would like to let them introduce themselves. So, Dr. Candace Bond, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Dr. Candace Bond. I have a PhD in literature, actually, but for the last almost 10 years now, I've been directing a writing center at a research university. And so I've kind of shifted over into the field of rhetoric and composition. And I was really interested in joining this conversation because as a writing center director, I'm not a homeschooling parent, but I am getting all kinds of inquiries about how universities should navigate the development of this kind of software. And I just thought it would be fun to, like Michelle said, sit with some other people and talk through this and hear other people's ideas. So I'm here to learn as much as I am to share my perspective, and I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. And we also have Dr. Sabrina Weiss.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sabrina Weiss, and I have a PhD in Science and Technology Studies and a Master's in Bioethics. I currently teach interdisciplinary courses online, including food ethics, neuroscience, and science and technology ethics related topics. I facilitate book clubs together with Michelle, and I try to seek out excellent, diverse fantasy and science fiction for readers. When I did academia, I focused on gender studies, technology theory, and biomedical issues. And I previously taught at a tech focused university and also have coached and tutored high school students in topics ranging from math and SAT, ACT preparation to competitive speech and debate.
Excellent. So I think we're coming at this with a great combination of perspectives, both from our professional training and from our personal experiences. And I think that we're going to have some different, I know we already, as we were preparing for this, so we were kind of talking how we were taking on some different perspectives already. So I don't think we're all going to agree necessarily on these different issues, which I hope means that this will be a really interesting and fruitful discussion. So we have broken this discussion up into separate broad questions, and we'll probably break the series up into multiple videos so that you don't have to listen to it all in one giant take. And we have just kind of to keep us on a general outline, but this is an unscripted chat. So we're just going to see where it takes us. And even though we have those broad general questions, there's a good chance that we'll open it up into other topics as we sort of explore that together. So the first question that we have is, why are we talking about this now? And does anybody have any thoughts on what it is that's making this so prevalent at this moment?
Well, I think that, ChatGPT came out in November. And prior to that, even though there were a lot of text generator softwares out there and a lot of programs that use predictive text technology, I don't think that people thought it was possible for, these kinds of programs to write the way that a human does. And so I think we're here now because people were kind of caught up off guard a little bit, or I know I was. I knew that these things were being developed, but I just didn't realize how soon it would be that they would be a part of our daily lives. And it seems like it's just gone so quickly, from November to now February. So about 3 months, it's like now we have Google and Bing launching their own program. So it just seems like this is something that just a few months ago seemed like science fiction. And now all of a sudden it's going to be like ubiquitous in our lives. So I think that people are just trying to figure out how to process that.
Yeah, I feel like ever since like the Jetsons, we've sort of been in this, well, it's coming, probably even earlier than that, right? It's coming, it's coming, it's coming, but it felt like, well, why prepare for something that might not happen in my lifetime that might never impact me as an individual? And how can I prepare for something when I don't know what the it is? And because so much of that, like I like that you said, it feels like science fiction. So much of our science fiction explores technologies in tandem with like what it would mean for our morality and what it would mean for our ethics. So we often see sort of these worst case scenarios and most extreme scenarios. And so I think that that didn't, as much as they were fun thought exercises and meaningful ethical exercises, I don't know that they gave us much in a concrete way of like, well, how will I deal with these tools? And so I do think that actually having it in front of you on your computer, where you're like, oh, I could have this thing script my whole article that I'm supposed to write tomorrow. Is it okay for me to do that? Was a really new experience.
Yeah, so I have quite a few thoughts that have just come up. One of them was the idea of it seemed like it was far in the future, it's far in the future, and then suddenly it's here. And I just learned a term called accelerando, and apparently it's the name of a science fiction book too. And it's we're in the accelerando period of new technology adoption, and it's an exponential growth scenario. And we know that humans are very bad at predicting exponential or logarithmic types of progressions. And so we didn't realize it was here until it's here, and now it's suddenly everywhere. Interestingly, I got that term from a video I was watching by somebody who was involved in the D&D community. So what's really interesting when we were talking about how it's been showing up everywhere, the Dungeons and Dragons communities online had kind of this big implosion in January, and it had to do with licensing and some other things that I'd be happy to answer questions on later. But one of the topics that came up was the possibility of having AI dungeon masters to run games powered by programs similar to ChatGPT. And so that brought up a whole bunch of concerns. And so it's permeated into hobby spheres and all sorts of other spheres. But what's interesting is that artists were already upset over the art and visual graphics generation. And it had been starting to talk there, but a lot of people weren't really paying attention. And now that suddenly it's involving writing and essays and college essays and assignments, now more people are taking notice. So again, we're kind of in that accelerando where suddenly, it wasn't a problem, and now a lot of people are concerned about it. The other thing that comes to mind, Michelle, was when you were talking about how we're, writing, we read and write stories about AI, and there's the idea of the HAL, right? The sinister, emotionless, completely lacking in empathy, artificial intelligence who decides, oh, I'm just going to get rid of humans because humans are bad or inadequate. And so many of our AI stories, especially in the West, are about that sinister, unfeeling AI. But some of the discussions I've seen have shown, there was one, Janelle Shane, The Danger of AI is Weirder Than You Think. Hilarious video because she's showing how the AIs have no motivation. They're not sinister, they're not good, but they will follow things completely literally, and they will follow exactly the parameters you have set up, but they won't be able to intuit what we want them to do. And so you end up with some incredibly wacky outcomes. And that is, if anything, the more likely danger. And I say danger in the sense of it's not sinister, but we are going to have consequences and impacts that we couldn't even predict. And that's where some of the concern comes from.
I read her book, You Look Like a Thing and I Love You, with the teen book club, and
She wrote that.
yes, it's a fantastic book, and she illustrated with all these little doodles to explain these really complicated ways that I learned so much about AI that I went into it not really understanding it, feeling like it was just a magical black box. And she does a great job of kind of breaking it down for a layperson. So I
Yeah.
definitely recommend that book if anybody's interested in learning some more about it. Well, and I'll say that when I first saw the headlines, they were like, oh, here it comes. It's going to replace English teachers. I was like, I have been hearing this my entire career in English that like everything's about to be obsolete. Students, I mean, it's happened with every bit of technological advancement. And my initial reaction when I saw the headlines, like, yeah, the world is ending again. The world has ended, 45 times since I
We're in
started on this
2020
path.
part 3.
Right. But then when I went to actually go play around with it, I became less dismissive. Like I was like, it could never fool a teacher who actually wrote good prompts. It could never fool a teacher who's actually reading it. And then when I started seeing some of the stuff it produced, I'm like, no, this could be a game changer in that sense, right? The way that it is doing that. So I don't know. I'm interested to see as we continue with some of these other questions, how you all feel as educators, if it is changing the way that you think about that or not.
So a question I have to maybe to pose is why is it so convincing? And I have some thoughts on this, but I was interested in why is this so impressive? Why is this so convincing? Why is ChatGPT making us think, oh no, this is actually going to replace some element of human writing?
For me, it was just that I put in a prompt that I thought was pretty imaginative and unique, and it spit back stuff that I could see a student writing. And it was really just that simple for me. I was like, oh, I couldn't. And for me, I immediately went to like, if I received this from a student, would I suspect that they hadn't written it? And then even if I did suspect that they hadn't written it, how could I handle that without destroying my trust relationship with that student? And that was where I started to feel like I was on shaky ground.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I hadn't really thought about why it's so convincing. I had thought more about just all, teachers are so burnt out in every facet. So I just thought of all of the additional labor faculty and teachers and parents will have to do to really focus on what we should be focusing on anyway, which is teaching writing as a process. But, even I, who am a champion of teaching writing as a process, like sometimes have to take some shortcuts here and there in terms of like, using peer review in replacement of like giving my own feedback sometimes on writing, or having students do some things outside of class, or when I'm not, there for immediate feedback, or, just whatever it might be. And I just thought, kind of like Michelle said, how difficult it will be to establish relationships built on trust, and to teach people when we just, you can't tell the difference all the time. But if we're focusing on product, maybe that's a good thing. But if we're focusing on process and teaching people skills, it maybe is, there's got to be a lot more caution there. Um, so yeah, I guess I hadn't really thought of the convincing aspect, because I was more focused on just how does this change how we approach process, rather than the product itself.
Great points, Candace. You kind of bring up something that I was musing about was there's so much discussion about students using this to create papers and then turn them in. And there's arguments pro and con, but I see a lot of people saying, why not? Why shouldn't students be able to do this? But then it makes me wonder, and Candace, something you mentioned made me think of this. What if teachers were to generate lessons from ChatGPT? Would families feel okay paying teachers to teach? Would they feel like they're getting a real product or not? And so then we get into this interesting question of kind of parallelism: is when is it a sufficiently high quality product? When is it sufficient effort and work by somebody? And when is it not? And so that's a question I'd like to just kind of toss out to our audience and to people in general: is are there certain products or professional efforts that we don't think we would want to pay for, that we don't think would be acceptable from ChatGPT? And why do we make a distinction between some types of work and other types of work?
And it also makes me that's an excellent point that makes me wonder, how much do people really understand where those products are coming from already, especially when we are in an environment where so much of our labor is underpaid and overworked, both at the post-secondary and K through 12 level, where teachers just have tremendous teaching loads. A lot of higher ed is done by underpaid adjunct labor, and a lot of those cut corners are already happening in a variety of ways, and in ways that are, quite frankly, encouraged by the institutions, right? Like we've bought a prescription or a subscription to this, you know, online LMS system where all the prompts are already generated for you, and it auto grades most of the papers, and all you have to do is go through and give it your stamp of approval so that you can grade it as fast as possible. I remember that, like, we had vendors sponsored by like the department where I was training coming in and showing us those tools, and there was never an ethical question of like, are you teaching enough if this is what's being presented to your students? um I mean, there may have been like a question of like, that sounds boring and I don't want to teach that way, but it didn't seem like there was anybody saying that it was wrong to rely on those tools. And to me, this seems like, I wonder if as people get concerned about how teachers may be using ChatGPT to cut some corners, if that might pull back the curtain on what is happening behind the scenes already and hopefully get people to support teachers and educators of all stripes having the financial and time and resources that they need to like really provide the educational services that our learners deserve.
Yeah, I mean, the concern about teachers being, being underpaid, overworked, burnt out. I wonder if maybe that's part of why this why ChatGPT has caught so many people's attention, because all of us are on about our third year of burnout now, and so that idea of, oh, something that can help us to write, to whatever extent we decide to use it, there's something very appealing about that. And at the same time, we've had the curtain pulled back on higher education as universities had to go to distance remote learning during the pandemic, that a lot of people started questioning, is it worth it going to Harvard or to this really expensive Ivy League level school when I'm getting the same quality or even worse quality education than I would be getting at a local state school or even at a community college, where many community colleges already were adapted to flexible learning. And so I would posit that that's one of the reasons why this has really gotten everybody's attention, because we're already in this phase of questioning not just expertise for various political reasons, but also education and the formats and the structures of education.
So that is our first video on why are we talking about this now. Hopefully we've convinced you that this conversation it's the chaotic moment for it, that this is the time to tackle it. And up next, we're going to be talking about why do we have academic writing? What is the purpose of it? And why do we make students do it? So check out that video to learn more.